My parents come first. Your mom has to leave. Lol. My husband said this to my mother out of the blue. Believe it or not, his parents had moved into our house without even asking. Okay, I'll go, my mother said sadly and left the house in tears. I'm Nancy, 30 years old, and I own a small cosmetics business. My husband Jimmy is also 30 and works as a hairstylist. We met through work and have been married for a year. Before getting married, I lived with my mother, who is chronically ill. She has been single since divorcing my dad. After dating Jimmy for a year and a half, we talked about marriage. I asked if we could live with my mom after getting married because I couldn't bear to leave her alone. At first, Jimmy didn't want to live with my mother because he thought it would be awkward. We couldn't agree on this, so we decided to meet each other's parents. When Jimmy came to my house and met my mother, he was surprised. This house is big and beautiful. It's big enough for several people, Jimmy said, admiring it, but he still didn't want to live there. So, I offered to pay all the living expenses if he agreed to live with us. He agreed to this. I also met his parents. Their house was old and worn out, but they were very kind to me. With our living situation settled, we got married. I make more money than Jimmy, and my friends noticed the difference in our incomes. But since he had a job and was independent, I didn't worry about the money. I liked his personality more. I'm usually a pessimist, but Jimmy's cheerful personality made me feel happy. I was glad to have him as my life partner. Jimmy, who is friendly and works as a hairstylist, quickly got along with my mother, so I thought living together would be easy. But I was wrong. After we got married, Jimmy started relying on me more and more for money. My mother didn't like this and often scolded him. Jimmy, are you borrowing money from Nancy again? I've never seen you pay it back, my mother would say. Jimmy, annoyed, would reply, I'll pay it back with my next paycheck. You said you borrowed money because you didn't have enough to go out drinking. But if you don't have money, you should stop going out, my mother argued. It's for work, so I can't avoid work-related outings, Jimmy replied. My mother wasn't convinced. Basically, you stay at home all day so you can't understand. Jimmy got annoyed. To ease the tension, I quickly said, I get why you want to go out with colleagues, so it's okay. Nancy, you're too soft on him, my mother said. He said the same thing last month and the month before. Has he paid you back? No, he hasn't paid me back. In the years since we got married, I've lent Jimmy several thousand, but he hasn't paid most of it back. Since he doesn't pay for living expenses, it's hard to believe he's out of money, I added. Then Jimmy said, living with your mother is really hard. She's so difficult. Since I have to deal with that, borrowing some money should be okay, right? You agreed to this by letting me cover the living expenses. I'm not lending you any more money. Please, I don't have much with my low salary, I replied. Even though I kept refusing, Jimmy kept asking for money until I eventually gave in. I knew this couldn't continue and tried to talk seriously with him, but he always dismissed it with a smile. Honestly, I'm thinking about divorce, I admitted. When we were dating, Jimmy often treated me to meals and gave me gifts. Now, even though it's only been a year since we got married, things have changed a lot. I hoped he would change, but that hope quickly faded. Jimmy quit his job at the salon without telling me and then got into debt from gambling. I'm sorry, I'll pay it back for sure. Can you cover my debt? He secretly asked me. But my sharp-witted mother noticed and joined in. Are you asking Nancy for money again? No, Jimmy looked uncomfortable, not wanting my mother to know. But I was really angry and told my mother everything. She exploded with anger. There's no way we're covering your debt. Get a new job and pay it off yourself. I'm in trouble because the repayment deadline is coming up. Can't you and Nancy cover it? Jimmy pleaded. I'm in trouble because the repayment deadline is approaching. Can't you and Nancy cover it? Don't be ridiculous. My mother was furious. Ever since living with you, MIL, it's been nothing but lecturing. I'm getting stressed out. You even criticize my appearance, saying it's not appropriate for a hairstylist. Jimmy was irritated. Are you saying this is my fault? I didn't gamble before we got married. I started going to casinos and horse races because I didn't want to come home. That's just an excuse. I'm borrowing money because Nancy said it's okay. It has nothing to do with you. Calm down, both of you. I tried to intervene, but it was in vain. It turned into a huge argument. From the next day, my husband and mother stopped hiding their disdain for each other and didn't speak to each other at all. A week later, on a weekend morning, people from a moving company suddenly arrived at our house. Ha! What's going on? I was stunned. They are here. Jimmy opened the door excitedly. Then a large number of boxes were brought into the house. What's happening? I asked Jimmy. At that moment, his parents showed up. Good morning. Why are you here so early? My mother was bewildered, standing with the people from the moving company and Jimmy's parents. My parents are moving in from today, Jimmy suddenly announced. What? What are you talking about? I had no idea about this, I said, astonished. Today is the moving day. I look forward to all of us living together, Jimmy said casually. It was unbelievable. My in-laws were moving in without permission. My parents come first. You, my MIL, need to leave. Whoa, my husband told my mother. What is this? My mother was at a loss. This is my mother's house, you know, I said, and my husband looked surprised. Huh? He had assumed that since I run a company, I had bought the house, I realized. Really, my husband was fled. I said, since it's my mother's house, there's no way she should leave, I told him firmly. But they've already moved out of their house. What? Are you serious? I was stunned by his rashness. Did you think we would just allow them to move in unannounced? I asked. No, but the house is big and you have money, so what's the problem? I was infuriated by his flippant attitude. Enough already. You're unemployed, in debt, and now this? Absolutely not. Shut up. You should experience living with in-laws too. For the first time, my husband yelled at me with a terrifying face. I won't let them leave. I was intimidated, having never seen him like this. He used to be so kind. How did things get to this point? Did my request for him to live with us change him this much? No, it wasn't that. Maybe we shouldn't have gotten married in the first place. I was filled with despair at that moment. Fine, I'll leave. My mother spoke up. What? I was shocked. I'm sorry. It was wrong of me to ask my married daughter to live with me. My mother looked sad. I desperately tried to explain, but I was worried about you living alone with your illness. That's why I asked Jimmy to live with us. It's okay then, Jimmy and I will leave. You can stay here. It's fine. See? Your mother is okay with it, my husband said with a smirk. He was clearly thrilled about my mother leaving. My mother went to her room and started packing her suitcase. I'll come back for my things once I find a place. Mom, wait, I said frantically. Nancy, be nice to your in-laws. My mother quickly packed her things and headed to the front door. Goodbye, my husband said. Goodbye, my mother replied, tears streaming down her face. Mom, this house has been our home since before I was born. Are you really going to let it go over this? I tried to stop her. She looked down, wiping her tears with a tissue. Her shoulders were shaking as she couldn't stop crying. It's okay, I'll handle the house expenses, so don't worry. Goodbye, she said, her voice breaking and her eyes red. Watching her slender back as she left, I felt a deep anxiety. Yay, we got the house. My husband was triumphant. After my mother left, I couldn't believe his attitude. I quickly packed a suitcase with my essentials and decided to leave the house too. You're leaving just because my parents moved in. My husband called after me, but I ignored him and walked out. After that, I stayed in the same hotel as my mother and commuted to work from there. I had brought with me 5 days worth of suits, but I was missing many things since I left in a hurry, so I bought what I needed. A month flew by as I was busy with work. One day, I took a day off during the week and went to our old home with my mother. We unlocked the door and entered the house. In the living room, we found my husband, his parents, and another woman. Nancy and mother. My husband stammered, surprised by our sudden arrival. The house was cluttered and messy compared to before. As usual, Jimmy and his parents were working and were living comfortably. MIL, you look different. Jimmy noticed the change in my mother, who used to be in her room, dressed in clothes without makeup. Now, she was dressed up with full makeup and wearing high-end brand clothes and jewelry. The first thing my mother said was, I've sold this house and the land. You need to move out. Move out? What are you talking about? Jimmy and his parents were shocked. The movers will be here soon. They'll pack my furniture, appliances, and belongings. They'll also pack your things. You need to leave within a week. Wait, what is going on? My husband was floored. I own this house and the land. I've let you stay here rent-free for over a month, so you should be grateful, my mother said firmly. No way. We're not leaving. My husband strongly resisted. In a week, this house and land will belong to someone else. If you're still here, then you'll be trespassing, and the police will get involved. Is that what you want? My mother had planned to sell the house and land for some time. The house was too big and hard to manage, so she was considering moving to a smaller, more manageable place. When Jimmy's parents moved in, she seized it as an opportunity to get back at Jimmy for causing me so much pain. Jimmy was stunned when he learned this. So when you were crying as you left the house? Oh, those tears were because I was trying so hard not to laugh at your triumphant face. I was acting. Didn't you think I was good? My mother said, laughing. Ma'am, it's time, her secretary informed her. Ma'am? My husband was stunned. You didn't know? I'm a consultant for the cosmetics company. When he heard the company name, my husband was shocked. Wait, that huge company? I thought you were unemployed. Well, I am at home a lot because of my chronic illness, so I left the company to Nancy's brother. Nancy is the president of our subsidiary. I didn't know any of this. Seems my daughter didn't trust you enough to tell you. Anyway, I'm leaving now. Make sure you move out by the deadline. With that, my mother left the house gracefully with her secretary. Nancy, why didn't you tell me? My husband immediately asked. I thought it would make living together even more difficult. Besides, I was worried you might try to borrow money from her too. Hearing my reason, my husband smirked. So, it turns out you have more wealth than I thought. The new place must be nice too, right? We'll move there too. That's not happening. I'm here to discuss our divorce. What? Divorce? My husband looked incredulous. And this woman sitting casually on the sofa, she's your mistress, isn't she? I said, looking at the woman who lowered her face uncomfortably. No, it's a misunderstanding. She's just an acquaintance, nothing more. My husband defended himself. This is the proof. I laid out photos on the table showing evidence of his affair. I had been suspicious of his infidelity for some time and hired a private investigator. The countless borrowing of money and gambling were likely spent on this woman too. When did you take these? The photos showed him entering the hotel with the mistress. I'll be demanding alimony. Realizing he couldn't hide anymore, my husband apologized. I'm sorry, I'll break it off with her. The divorce isn't just because of the affair. You don't work and you've racked up debt. I kept hoping you'd change, but I can't wait any longer. Hearing this, my husband countered, but you earn enough, so it would have been fine if I stayed home as a house husband, right? Why should I support a house husband who also cheats and racks up debt? I used to work, but since he kept lending me money, I lost the motivation. So it's my fault you stopped working. Then it's even clearer we should divorce. Seeing my resolve, my husband conceded, okay, let's divorce. I'll pay the alimony. I called the lawyer who had been waiting outside. We drafted a legal document regarding alimony, and my husband signed the divorce papers. I have prepared the lawyer to draft the documents, but I'm still entitled to half of your assets. We've been married for a year, so I should get half your annual income, he said, as if it were a matter of course. But it wasn't going to be that easy. We had a prenuptial agreement stating that there would be no division of assets in the event of a divorce. Remember what, Jimmy? You agreed to the prenup, didn't you? No, he finally remembered. It was agreed that there would be no division of assets if we divorced within 2 years. Yeah, I agreed, but I didn't expect this. Jimmy looked pale. At the time, you didn't imagine we'd separate, so you agreed to it without much thought. So if we divorce, you don't get a cent. You'll be only paying alimony. Hearing this, Jimmy hung his head. At that moment, the movers arrived, and I began directing them to pack. Wait a minute. What's this about being unemployed and in debt? You said you were a company president. Jimmy's mistress, who had kept quiet until now, shouted loud enough for the whole house to hear. Sorry, I was originally a hairstylist. I'm unemployed now, but I plan to find a new job soon. Apparently, Jimmy had lied about his job to his mistress. I'm breaking up with you, she shouted and immediately left the house. The movers finished packing my mother's and my belongings, then started packing Jimmy's and his parents' things. His parents were in shock at this sudden eviction. Later, I went to the local government office and filed for divorce. Our marriage lasted only a year. After we separated, Jimmy desperately searched for a new job but couldn't find one with conditions as good as his previous job, so he struggled to find employment. With alimony payments and debts, Jimmy and his unemployed parents ended up homeless. They eventually found part-time jobs and managed to rent a rundown apartment. My mother and I moved to a new place. It's a modest home but surrounded by nature and very comfortable. I have no lingering feelings for Jimmy, and I'm not considering remarriage right now. My work as a company president is fulfilling, and I'm living happily with my mother. My husband Camille apologized to me in such a Philippines manner, saying he got his mistress pregnant and we needed to break up. I was dumbfounded, and my affection for him ran out 6 months ago. Is the mistress someone I know? I asked. Yeah, it's Kyra. Remember meeting her again at Alice's wedding reception. Since then, my husband seemed completely unashamed. Alice's wedding was the year before last, so you've been cheating for over a year. Alice was a college classmate, and Kyra was a junior 2 years behind me. She was in the same research group as Alice, and we played tennis together in college, so I remember her well. She was nicknamed Little Devil behind her back and was quite famous in a way. Huh. Oh, is that so? Time flies when you get older. My husband just laughed it off. What on earth was he thinking? I can't understand him at all. I'm Viola, 30 years old. I met my husband in the college tennis club despite him being 5 years older at 35. He often showed up as an alumnus who loved happy hours, had lots of friends, and was friendly with everyone. He took great care of freshmen and was kind, but I later realized it was limited to girls after we started dating. I cried many times due to his cheating habits back then, but I loved him and married him right after graduation. But once I started working, I got to know the real him, or rather, his useless side. He frequently appeared in the tennis club's clubhouse, acting all high and mighty with the juniors because he was completely ignored by his peers. The truth was he was so incompetent at his job that he wasn't given any serious responsibilities. Even now, there's no prospect of a raise or promotion. He's just a pretentious good-for-nothing who can't do his job or household chores. I tried various things to change him after we got married, but his refusal to change made me give up. The reason I had to divorce him wasn't just that work was busy and it was a hassle, but also because his parents were good people, a reason that had nothing to do with my husband himself. So look, we need to split up quickly because of the baby coming. You can have this apartment, and I'll leave. That's the end of it, okay? I was taken aback by his careless words and my husband's sly grin. What? No way. Let's part ways cleanly. This is not a good opportunity. As I neared my 40s, I started wanting a child. I had graduated college and started working as a full-time employee. I found myself in a situation where I was earning more than my husband, and my company offered excellent parental and maternity leave benefits. I was ready to start a family, but despite our efforts, it just wasn't happening, and it broke my heart. The love I once felt for my husband had dwindled away, especially after discovering his affair and the news that he got the other woman pregnant. I was determined to cleanly and completely end the relationship. What infuriated me even more was his lack of remorse. Instead of apologizing, he simply voiced his needs and demands. It was evident that it was time to put an end to this unpleasant relationship that had dragged on for years. We would involve a lawyer, ask for compensation, and divide our property. And of course, we would expect something from Kyra as well. However, when I voiced my concerns about the financial aspect, my husband callously suggested that I take on the debt myself since it was his affair that caused the separation. When I glared at him, he relented, admitting that he might need his father's help to cover the expenses. I proceeded with the divorce proceedings and hired a lawyer. Despite multiple calls from my in-laws pleading with me to reconsider, I remained steadfast in my decision. Even my father-in-law broke down in tears, acknowledging that if I left, it would spell the end for him. My mother-in-law begged me to reconsider, expressing her love for me like her own daughter. But even they understood once I laid bare the truth about my husband's constant infidelity and laziness. Finally, they apologized profusely, hanging their heads in shame. They even paid the compensation in a lump sum on behalf of my husband, who had no savings of his own. They made him promise never to ask for their help again and to repay them promptly. I still can't fathom how such a careless and irresponsible man could come from parents as decent and responsible as his. I decided to retreat to my parents' house. The divorce proceedings, which I had anticipated as a hassle, wrapped up faster than I expected. Returning to my recently relocated family home, 6 months flew by. I found myself consumed by work on weekdays and occupied with household chores on weekends, leaving little room to dwell on my ex-husband. Then, Out of the blue, my best friend Alice called, seething with anger from the moment she started speaking. Viola, did you know your ex-husband Camille and Kyra? They're living it up in a new high-rise apartment, flaunting their wealth everywhere. Kara even had the audacity to invite me to her baby shower party. The presents alone costs over $100, and there's a $100 participation fee. It's outrageous, isn't it? She exclaimed. I was taken aback by the news. I hadn't realized that Kyra had given birth, let alone why she would reach out to Alice. Both my ex-husband and Kyra were well aware that Alice was my best friend. Why would Kyra even extend an invitation to her, knowing Alice would undoubtedly relay everything to me? When I tentatively mentioned this to Alice, her anger escalated even further. She did it deliberately, Viola. Deliberately. That awful woman had the nerve to tell me she's so happy now, thanks to Viola breaking up with Camille. Can you believe her audacity? She's the worst kind of person. I want to put her in her place somehow. Alice raged. That nickname from our college days resurfaced in my mind. Kara was always known as the little devil, stirring up trouble among seemingly happy couples. Even when relationships were strained because of her involvement, she remained composed, wearing a facade of innocence. If a couple splits up just because someone else shows interest, it wasn't true love to begin with, right? They would have broken up eventually anyway, so what's the harm? She'd say, her words dripping with sugary sweetness, all the while smirking knowingly. I felt a pang of pity for Kyra, realizing she might never have experienced genuine love. Despite this, I knew better than to involve myself with her, so I made the conscious decision to keep my distance, at least for the time being. Kara didn't matter much to me. There was something else that demanded my attention. Alice. There's only one newly constructed high-rise apartment building, right? Have you heard anything about them moving in? I asked Alice, seeking any information she might have. I've never met them, Alice quickly replied, but apparently it was very recent. They've been boasting about securing a spot. Fortunately, someone who had bought one of the units had to relocate for work and put it back on the market without moving in. Ah, that makes sense, I nodded, processing the information. So, your moving day is Sunday, right? The baby shower party is on Saturday. You'll only need to be cautious for one day. There are multiple elevators, and they might use different entrances. You're right, we haven't crossed paths so far, so it should be fine. Alice concurred. We live together, but unexpected situations can still arise. As fate would have it, an unexpected situation did indeed unfold on Saturday. While waiting for the elevator on the first floor, I found myself face to face with my ex-husband and Kyra as they stepped out of the elevator. Hey, Viola, what are you doing here? My ex-husband spoke first, with Kyra chiming in. Viola, are you here to celebrate with us? You must be eager to see our adorable baby, aren't you? Kyra's voice was cheerful, her smile radiant, but her eyes betrayed a different story. They held no hint of amusement. What? Seriously, did you come to crash the party without an invitation? My ex-husband interjected, his tone incredulous. To scope out the high-rise apartment or catch a glimpse of our little prince. The casual reference to the baby as both baby and prince grated on my nerves. That's not it, I retorted coolly. I was just waiting for the elevator. I responded, consciously switching to a polite tone midway through the conversation. Camille was now my ex, essentially a stranger, and I didn't want to create a scene. Ha, so you're planning to visit my house after all? Camille remarked with a hint of amusement. You're so silly, Viola. Stop being stubborn. Perhaps you're just envious of our luxurious high-rise apartment and our adorable little prince. Do you still harbor feelings for me? Are you feeling lonely and longing to see me again? Camille, that's not acceptable, I interjected firmly. Regardless of any lingering emotions you think I may have, you're now married to Kyra. It's inappropriate for me to barge into your home uninvited. And as for jealousy, Kyra, you're mistaken. But I appreciate your concern. Camille continued, dismissing my words. Sorry, Viola, but Kyra and our son are our top priorities now. You're not welcome here. As I listened to their conversation, I couldn't help but feel perplexed. It had been 6 months since I last saw my ex-husband, and yet his mindset remained as irrational as ever. Kara's attitude was equally baffling. It dawned on me that my cheating ex-husband and his new partner were a perfect match in their own peculiar way. Reflecting on it, I regretted wasting my precious 20s on Camille. I'm utterly ashamed of my past with Camille, wishing to bury those memories deep in darkness. If only I had ended things sooner without making excuses, I wouldn't have to endure this nonsense from my ex-husband and his partner. My words seemed to strike a nerve with Camille, who retorted, "What's that? You're really lacking charm. Learn from Kyra. Even her jealousy is endearing. She's just given birth, yet she still takes the effort to look stylish for me. Don't you find her admirable?" Not at all embarrassed, I replied calmly. I was simply going to the grocery store. I was dressed in a plain white t-shirt and jeans, clean and presentable. That's the problem. I grew tired of your simplicity. Camille snapped. Enough already. We have nothing to do with each other. Just go home. Annoyed by his dismissive tone, I retorted, "Actually, this is my home." Seeing their disbelief, I had to explain. I've been living with my parents in this high-rise apartment for 6 months now. My father was approached by salespeople when talks of selling the land he owns arose. They suggested that living in a high-rise would be more convenient, especially as he's getting older. While it's not entirely our land, we received a substantial sum from selling it. During negotiations, we were able to move into one of the higher floors for much less than market value. Camille was taken aback. "You're landowners with that much money." If I had known, I wouldn't have agreed to the divorce. "Give me back the compensation money." "There's no need for a property settlement," I replied firmly. "The compensation was a result of your affair, and the property settlement was a matter between us as a married couple." As I spoke, I noticed Kyra mumbling to herself, her silence speaking volumes. I caught it. "I can't believe Viola is living in a high-rise. I thought I had totally won," Kyra exclaimed, shooting me a glare. "But Viola, you don't have a baby or a loving partner, do you?" "I haven't lost yet." "Look, Kyra, I was never competing with you," I replied calmly. "In fact, I'm thankful to you for giving me the opportunity to break up with Camille." "Oh, and I'm moving out of my house tomorrow, so I don't think we'll see each other again." "What? Why? You just moved into a high-rise," they both exclaimed in surprise. I shrugged, explaining, "Maybe it's a matter of different values. It just wasn't a good fit for my family. I found living in a high-rise unsuitable for hanging laundry outside. There are no balconies on the higher floors for safety, and only some windows can be opened. It wasn't suitable for my mother and me, who preferred drying laundry and bedding in natural sunlight and wind without using a dryer. Plus, the intense sunlight made it too hot even with the air conditioning on. The building also shakes quite a bit during even a magnitude 3 earthquake. It's designed to sway to prevent collapse, and the higher floors shake more. It was terrifying. Most stressful of all was the daily elevator ride. It gets crowded during the morning commute, and it takes time since it stops on each floor. The advertised 3-minute walk from the station felt much longer in the elevator. We were too bothered by the drawbacks unique to high-rise living, so we decided to move to a regular house with a garden. After all, luckily, our apartment sold quickly at almost the same price we bought it for. As I finished explaining, both my ex-husband and Kyra grinned. "So we'll never see each other again." "So, a high-rise wasn't suitable for commoners like you. It's more suited for an elite celebrity family like mine," Kyra remarked sarcastically. I couldn't comprehend how he arrived at that conclusion, but one thing became abundantly clear. What I grew to despise and ultimately gave up on was that facet of you: pretentiousness without substance, an unwillingness to change or exert any effort. "I reached my breaking point with you, but it's alright now. You're beyond repair, so goodbye," I repeated, echoing my ex-husband's own words back to him. Stepping into the just-arrived elevator, I glanced at Kyra, who was glaring at both my astonished ex-husband and me. Right before the doors closed, I added one final remark. "By the way, are you sure the child is truly yours?" My ex-husband looked utterly perplexed, prompting me to clarify. "I mean exactly what I said, right, Kyra? You understand what I'm implying, don't you?" As the doors closed, I didn't know what transpired next in reality. However, during our struggle to conceive, I underwent tests at the gynecologist, which revealed no issues on my end. I began to suspect the problem might lie with my husband, but he adamantly refused to get tested. Hence, I delivered that incendiary parting shot. Later, I heard from a mutual friend who attended Kyra's baby shower. Despite boasting about their high-rise lifestyle, my ex-husband and Kyra were residing on the 3rd floor. Additionally, despite their extravagant demands for gifts and participation fees, only cheap snacks from the grocery store were served. When a friend voiced a soft complaint, Kyra reportedly exploded, demanding gratitude for the chance to see her baby up close and insisting on payment. This sparked a heated argument between my ex-husband and Kyra, leaving their gathering in disarray. Thanks in part to my earlier cryptic remark, it was revealed that my ex-husband and Kyra had moved into a high-rise but were struggling financially, attempting to swindle money from their friends through fabricated reasons. Their deceit caused outrage among their friends, who promptly left. Meanwhile, my family and I settled into a single-family home with a garden, where I recently welcomed an adorable kitten. Our former high-rise was embroiled in controversy due to significant defects and illegal construction methods, making it unsellable. Reflecting on our situation, we realized we were unexpectedly fortunate. Now, I find solace in my severed ties with my ex-husband and cherish the tranquility of my peaceful days. As I hang the laundry on a sunny afternoon, my kitten sometimes curls up on the clothes, its adorable sleeping face bringing me a sense of contentment. Today, like many others, was a good day. My uncle, flushed with alcohol, echoed words that cut deeper than any knife. His sentiments found harmony in the nods and murmurs of agreement from the other men gathered around. Emboldened by the chorus of support, my husband unleashed a torrent of criticism, each word hitting its mark with precision. His satisfaction gleamed in his eyes as he reveled in the validation of his peers. I forced a calm facade, swallowing my humiliation and rage with each breath. Then, just as tension reached its peak, my mother-in-law rose from her seat, her gaze a force to be reckoned with. "Is that truly all you have to offer?" Her words pierced the heavy air, silencing the room in an instant. "My name is Emma, and I'm a 40-year-old woman working in a medical office. I met Tom, my husband, a man 4 years my senior, through our shared love of tennis. We've been married for 13 years. Though we both longed for children, fate had other plans, leaving a bittersweet ache between us. My in-laws, who live separately, keep a vigilant eye on us, especially my mother-in-law. Our bond is strong. We often enjoy lunches out and shopping trips together. Losing my mother at a young age made my mother-in-law's presence all the more significant. She embraced me with a mother's love, cherishing me as if I were her own flesh and blood. While our marriage initially thrived, over time, my husband's demeanor shifted. After about a decade, he became increasingly domineering. His once gentle kindness toward me evaporated. Moreover, his workload burgeoned, leading to frequent overtime and business trips. 3 years ago, he was reassigned to a different department, exacerbating our disconnect. He now spends half the week away from home. Upon his sporadic returns, his demands are curt and dismissive. "Dinner?" he barks, or "Is the bath ready yet?" treating me as if I were merely a servant. Fed up, I once dared to voice my grievances. "You're not a child anymore. You should at least handle your own clothes," I protested. His response was chilling. "What nonsense is this? Your role is to obey me as your husband. Don't complain, you're my wife." For what felt like an eternity, my husband's accusatory finger jabbed the air, his voice rising in a crescendo of abuse. This ritual of verbal assault would replay whenever his mood soared, a relentless cycle I couldn't escape. His incessant nagging and troublesome behavior left me no choice but to acquiesce. Sitting at the dinner table one evening, I faced yet another onslaught of criticism. "More vegetables again? Am I supposed to eat like a rabbit now? Get some meat on the table. You know your cholesterol's high." Reluctantly, I resolved to reduce the meat intake. But before I could speak, he rose abruptly, flinging the meal I had prepared onto the floor. "No one knows my body better than me. I'll eat out," I declared, but my words fell on deaf ears as he stormed out, wallet and phone in hand, slamming the door behind him. Every day, I scoured the internet for low-salt, low-meat recipes, desperate to accommodate his high cholesterol flagged in his company's medical checkup. Yet despite my efforts, it all seemed in vain. As I stooped to clean up the mess on the floor, a wave of desolation washed over me. 3 hours later, my husband returned, his tune merry, his senses dulled by alcohol. In resignation, I retrieved his coat from where he carelessly flung it, only to catch a whiff of grilled meat mingled with a perfume unfamiliar to me. Doubts that had lingered in the shadows of my mind surfaced with renewed intensity. I had suspected infidelity in the past, but lacking concrete evidence, I chose to suppress my concerns. Yet the distinct scent of that perfume fueled my suspicions like never before. From then on, whenever my husband's temper flared, he would vanish without explanation, returning home only to rush into the shower. Each time, the telltale fragrance lingered in the air, a haunting reminder that something was amiss. Soon his careless whistling in the shower would be silenced unless I confronted the truth lurking within his coat. Bolstered by my growing conviction of his infidelity, I resolved to gather evidence to confront him. 3 weeks later, on New Year's Day, we made our customary visit to my in-laws' home, where relatives congregated for the annual celebration. The table was adorned with a feast prepared lovingly by my mother-in-law, a colorful array tempting the senses. Amid greetings exchanged and well wishes shared, my husband's discontent simmered just beneath the surface. "Don't hold back, Emma. Dig in," my mother-in-law encouraged, to which I gratefully replied. Yet my husband's gaze bored into me with disapproval as I savored the meal, appreciating the effort put forth by his mother. "Where are the chopsticks?" His voice pierced the air, breaking the harmony of the gathering. Hastily, I fetched them from the kitchen, presented them to him, only to be met with another demand. "And the cups?" he queried, his irritation palpable. "Shouldn't she anticipate these things without being asked? You need to be more attentive to your surroundings," he chided, his words like barbs aimed at my every move. Despite the presence of our extended family, my husband's verbal assaults persisted. "I'm not a mind reader. You have to communicate with me," he insisted, his tone cutting through the festive atmosphere. Suppressing my frustration, I handed him a glass, which he accepted with a charming smile as he sipped the sake poured by our relatives. "Would you care for a drink, Emma?" my uncle kindly offered, but my husband interjected, "She's on chauffeur duty today," dismissing the gesture. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law and the other women toiled away in the kitchen, preparing lunch and attending to the needs of the men. Donning an apron I brought from home, I joined the flurry of activity, working tirelessly alongside them, while my father-in-law and the other men reveled in their merriment, consuming one bottle of sake after another. The sounds of their boisterous laughter filled the air. Expressing her sympathy for our busyness, my mother-in-law interrupted our tasks to offer us a respite, serving steaming cups of tea. As we sat together, engaging in light conversation, my husband's voice echoed from the living room, a reminder of the tension simmering just beyond our temporary sanctuary. "Let's spice things up with some honesty, shall we? A little stress relief for the new year," my husband proposed, to the delight of the gathered guests. "The loser of a round of rock, paper, scissors gets to spill the beans," he declared, his words slurred from alcohol. "That sounds like a riot," my mother-in-law chimed in, her interest piqued. Little did she know, I had my own agenda for this New Year's Eve gathering. As the game commenced with enthusiastic shouts, I seized the opportunity presented by my husband's unexpected suggestion. Retrieving something from my bag, I discreetly tucked it into my apron pocket. Amidst the raucous game, the losers vented their frustrations about work and bosses, met with sympathetic nods and murmurs of agreement. "It's all too true," the chorus of listeners echoed. Finally, it was my husband's turn to air his grievances, having lost the game of rock, paper, scissors. Anticipation and anxiety knotted in my stomach as I awaited his revelations. "My complaint is that my wife lacks attractiveness, and her cooking leaves much to be desired." My husband's words struck me like a bolt of lightning, leaving me reeling in shock. My father-in-law, clearly uncomfortable, hastily cleared his throat. "But when you two tied the knot, you couldn't stop praising her beauty and culinary skills," he interjected, attempting to diffuse the tension. "That was ages ago, Dad. Nowadays, she serves up bland dishes filled with nothing but leaves like rabbit food." My uncle's demeanor darkened at the revelation. "It's unacceptable. As his wife, she should step up her game." His sentiments found resonance among the men present. Unbeknownst to them, I had dedicated countless hours pondering my husband's health and meticulously planning our meals. Yet their words flowed freely, oblivious to my efforts. Overwhelmed by a cocktail of embarrassment and fury, I longed to escape. As the conversation shifted to complaints about wives, my husband led the charge. "I toil away every day, yet my allowance remains unchanged. Stop your griping and obey me," my father-in-law chuckled in agreement, while the wives, downtrodden, remained silent. Then it was my husband's turn once more. "Everyone else is blessed with children," he declared, "but my wife is defective, incapable of bearing offspring." His callous words pierced me to the core, shattering the illusion of our marriage. The ache of unfulfilled dreams and the sting of betrayal weighed heavy on my heart, drowning me in a sea of sorrow and frustration. I inhaled deeply, willing the tears threatening to spill over to retreat. "It'll all work out, Emma." My mother-in-law's gentle grip on my hand offered a modicum of comfort. With a heavy sigh, she rose from her seat, her countenance dark with a resolve I hadn't witnessed before. "Is that all you've got to say?" Her unexpected outburst jolted the men, accustomed to her usual gentle demeanor. The once vibrant atmosphere fell into an uneasy silence. "Come on now, let's not ruin the fun," my father-in-law attempted to diffuse the tension, addressing my mother-in-law. "Fun? Are you the only ones enjoying yourselves here? You should have put a stop to this." My mother-in-law's voice trembled with righteous indignation. "Shame on you, speaking to her like that, labeling her defective. How dare you?" she continued, her gaze piercing. Yes, she's right." My father-in-law's troubled expression betrayed his discomfort as he averted his eyes. "We all have grievances to air," he conceded. "Exactly." The women, previously silent, erupted in support, their applause ringing through the room. "Let's not hold back. Speak your mind, and we'll all feel better." The words of my mother-in-law ignited a cascade of truth from the women, each expressing their grievances with newfound courage. "If you want more allowance, then earn more. Why not take initiative instead of expecting us to cater to your every need?" they demanded, their voices ringing with determination. As the wives confronted their husbands with precise criticisms, the men faltered, offering apologies in succession. Only my husband remained unmoved, his indifference palpable. "Why should I apologize for speaking the truth?" he retorted, locking eyes with Noah in a tense exchange. "I refuse to apologize, and I'll say it again. She's unattractive, a terrible cook, and incapable of bearing children." My husband's accusatory finger pointed squarely at me, each word a dagger to my heart. The dam of sorrow and frustration I had meticulously held in check finally burst, giving way to a tidal wave of rage. "You have no right to speak to me like that," I confronted my husband with a measured tone, my hand discreetly gripping the cell phone hidden in my apron pocket. "It's unfair that you're the only one allowed to vent. I have grievances too, you know, and you wouldn't object, would you? You've aired your complaints about me plenty of times. I'd welcome appreciation, but not baseless accusations." With a deliberate motion, I withdrew an envelope from my pocket, scattering its contents across the table where our relatives sat. The photographs revealed damning evidence: my husband entering a hotel room with another woman, then exiting her apartment, hand in hand. Bolstered by my suspicions, I had discreetly installed a GPS tracker in his car, providing irrefutable proof of his infidelity. Originally intended for a private discussion with my mother-in-law, the situation demanded immediate action. Guests filled the room as the truth unfolded, disrupting the once jovial atmosphere. Frantically, my husband attempted to gather the incriminating photos. "Isn't it normal for husbands to stray?" He appealed to the men for validation, but his plea fell on deaf ears. No one in the room offered agreement, leaving him isolated in his deceit. As my uncle, once a supporter of my husband, denounced infidelity with a resounding "No, that's unforgivable," the other men nodded in solemn agreement. Yet my husband remained defiant. "You lot couldn't even dare to stray from your wives," he taunted, his laughter hollow and bitter. My uncle, spurred into action by my husband's audacity, rose from his seat. "Who truly bears the shame here?" he challenged, echoed by murmurs of concurrence from the men, their gazes piercing through my husband's facade. Despite his attempts to maintain a facade of strength and righteousness, my husband's demeanor reeked of desperation, leaving me repulsed by his arrogance. With resolve, I confronted him once more, armed with further evidence. "A week ago, I received a call from Maruka-san, your newfound love," I revealed, each word laden with the weight of betrayal. "She claimed you've been seeing each other for 3 years now." My husband's feeble attempts at denial only served to betray his guilt. "She even mentioned your subordinate, and the fact that she's 7 months pregnant," I continued, unmasking the deceit woven into his web of lies. "She pleaded for a divorce, stating that you refused to acknowledge the child." Fearing my reaction, his protests dissolved into stammered excuses as I extracted my phone from my apron pocket, placing it on speaker for all to hear. "Maruka-san, did you hear what I just said?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and sorrow. Through stifled sobs, her response came quietly but unmistakably. "Yes," she confirmed, her words carrying the weight of truth, shattering the illusion my husband had meticulously constructed. In fact, the day before New Year's, I had reached out to the girl, informing her of my intentions to call her the next day. Seeking insight into my husband's true intentions, she had agreed, and thus, I made the call just before confronting him. Overhearing the conversation, she was overcome with tears and fury. He told me to wait until our divorce is finalized, she lamented, her voice trembling with betrayal. I never uttered such words. Surely, as my wife, you understand, don't you? Why would I say such a thing? You're the one who betrayed me, my husband countered, his gaze falling to the ground in shame. I'll never forgive you, she declared before abruptly ending the call, her trust in my husband shattered. Presenting the divorce papers I had prepared, I demanded his signature, only to be met with a storm of fury. Absolutely not. I can't simply sign this on a whim. How dare you, sis? Besides, after all this, you'll owe me 2 million yen in alimony. No, I refuse to divorce you. I simply don't have that kind of money, he protested, his demeanor devolving into childish petulance as he stamped his feet in protest. Witnessing my husband's unprecedented display of immaturity, I nearly chuckled, but remained resolute in my demand for divorce and alimony. Tom, you're not a child. It's shameful. My mother-in-law's frustration with his pitiful behavior was evident as she scolded him with an exasperated expression. You can't just refuse divorce and alimony. Face reality with dignity, I pressed on, my tone unwavering. It's not that simple, Mom. Dad, you understand how I feel, right? My husband appealed, seeking validation. Absolutely not. I can't condone your actions. My father-in-law's response was firm, leaving my husband with little recourse. Reluctantly, he signed the divorce papers and agreed to the alimony, his tears held back only by sheer willpower. Believing this gathering to be the opportune moment to expose my husband's infidelity, I pushed him further. Oh, by the way, I've terminated our lease at the end of the month. One home should suffice for you, shouldn't it? My words were met with applause from the women and deep sighs from the men, and my husband left my in-laws' house, seemingly fleeing from the attention of everyone present. The next day, they filed for divorce at the city office and relocated to a rental apartment I had already arranged. Additionally, I sought 1.5 million yen in alimony from my ex-husband's unfaithful partner. It would have been a harsh blow for the girl, having quit her job upon learning of her pregnancy. But forgiveness was out of the question. After losing his apartment, my ex-husband sought refuge with the girl. Promptly, he acknowledged paternity upon divorce. However, she eventually severed ties, demanding 1.5 million yen per month in child support. Moreover, my ex-husband resigned from his job following the scandal's exposure, making it untenable for him to continue with the company. Left abandoned by his parents and unable to secure a new job, my ex-husband resorted to sleeping in internet cafes and juggling part-time gigs to meet his alimony obligations. Susan, my former mother-in-law, confided in me about his deteriorating health, citing elevated cholesterol levels and the toll his self-indulgent lifestyle had taken since our divorce. Interestingly, Susan and I forged an unexpected friendship post-divorce, growing closer than ever before. Now I find solace in the tranquility of my life, relishing the peace that comes with solitude.